InnerQuest explores various pathways through which you can connect with the infinite wisdom of the universe and apply it to personal, professional, and spiritual growth. This program, featuring accomplished practitioners, educators, and authors, is provided by Infinity Foundation, an innovative center for holistic studies and research. We invite you to share this journey with us.
Hello, welcome to InnerQuest. My name is Jay Stone, your host for today, and our guest is Jennifer Weigel. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Well, let me tell the audience a little bit about your background.
You got it.
Jennifer is an Emmy Award-winning journalist based in Chicago. She has spent over 2 decades working in television, radio, and in print, and has written 4 books exploring wellness and spirituality. Jennifer, would you like to add anything to your bio?
Well, I think that the journalism hat has always been there, if that makes sense, right? Started off doing radio, then television, then writing, then print, then back to radio, then back to writing. So I've just I like to say I'm a storyteller, but the platform changes. So sometimes it's in broadcasting, and sometimes it's on a stage, and sometimes it's a live event, and other times it's right here with you.
And what interested you in journalism? What age did you start?
Well, I was always a writer, a really good writer, like English, and I studied theater. So to be quite honest, my dad was in broadcasting, and I didn't want to do what my dad did. I wanted to tell stories, but I just didn't think it was going to be, through broadcasting, because he was really adamant about not wanting my brother or myself. I have an older brother, Rafer, and the two of us both wound up in broadcasting. I was saying earlier that there's some families that have lawyers, and some families that have doctors, and some families that have, broadcasters and journalists, and that's sort of what my family path has been. But I didn't think I was waiting tables, and I was doing theater in Chicago, a wonderful theater town as Chicago is.
Yes.
Doing Shakespeare, for I think about 4 people. And I was offered a job as a traffic reporter, so I would work early morning traffic, then I would go do the lunch at Davis Street Fish Market in Evanston.
As a waitress?
As a waitress, yes. And then I would go do shadow traffic. So it was like I'd had 3 jobs, and then I would do theater at night.
Well, your dad had a reputation as a Renaissance man, and do you think he influenced you as well?
Oh, very much so. So education was very important to him, and he was a history major at Yale. People think of him as the sportscaster, the Weigel Wiener guy, because that was what he was known for. But the truth is, he was a very well-read, very well-educated, and he always told us that just know as much as you can about everything, and then it will come in handy. So he wound up as a sports journalist because he worked for the Daily News newspaper first, covering college sports. That was his first beat, if you will. And then it kind of blossomed from there, and he was put on TV when nobody wanted to be on TV, in like the Ron Burgundy era, I call it.
Yeah. Well, your dad has still left an impression on me, so.
Oh, that's great. I'd love to hear that. He's been gone almost 19 years now, so it's been a while. And he passed away at 56, and when he died, that's really what took me on this journey of, because at the time I was working as a reporter at CBS, and it was the everything's wrong, back to you. It was the cars and the fires and the hit and runs, and I thought that life was too short. I just saw my dad take his last breath. There's more out there, and I wanted to explore it. So I started interviewing different people in different I would say specialties, and science and spirituality. I've tried to bridge that gap a little bit because I was very curious about it from a personal standpoint, and then I just wound up continuing to have the dialogue.
Well, who are some of the people that you've interviewed and have helped alter the course of your life?
Well, so many of them. But I think the one that changed it the most was Dr. Mary Neal. She's an orthopedic surgeon. She was in a kayaking accident, and her kayak flipped, and she was without oxygen for 30 minutes, 30.
Wow.
And she said, she was coming to Chicago, and at the time I was a columnist for the Chicago Tribune. And so I pitched it to my editor, and they said, no, thanks, sorry, but we have no interest in talking to a woman who died and lived to talk about it. They thought it was too weird. But I said, but she's a medical doctor, and she wrote this book called To Heaven and Back, which of course wound up being a New York Times bestseller. She was all over every broadcast outlet after this. We missed the boat for the Tribune, but I wound up putting her in my 3rd book, This isn't the life I ordered. And she challenged me. She said that when she was dead, and she literally was, no heartbeat, nothing. She was in what she calls the light, looking down at the scene, which a lot of people describe. And her husband was there, who's also a doctor, medical doctor, and they were trying to revive her. And she felt no pain, complete love, complete acceptance. A lot of people who've had near-death experiences explain it this way.
I've had one.
Yeah. And you've had, exactly. So that explanation. And so she had never heard of anything like this. She said, I'm a scientist. I'm a pragmatist. You couldn't make this up if you put a gun to her head. So she was told a bunch of things that she had to go back and tell her story to anybody who would listen, even if it's just to one person. Mm-hmm. So she did. She came back and goes to hospitals across the country to tell her story, and sometimes one doctor shows up and sometimes it's an auditorium full. And now she has 2 best-selling books. But she really changed my life because she challenged me to look for those signs. She said, look for the signs and signals. They're always there.
Were there any physical disabilities left after her accident?
She was completely fine. She's completely healed. Her leg is completely healed. And as a surgeon, she was watching the break as it was happening very scientifically, like, ooh, that's a bad tear. That's going to be hard to put back together. Sure, she had to go through rehabilitation, but now she's completely fine.
Yes. And has there been any other people you've interviewed who helped change the course of your life?
Well, I'm really fascinated these days by people who have had near-death experiences. There's a woman named PMH Atwater who investigates primarily lately children who've had near-death experiences. Mm-hmm. And the thing I love about the children who've had near-death experiences is that they don't have the access to go out and compare stories with other people who've had what they say NDEs, right? Because they're not going to the library, they're not on YouTube, and their stories are so similar. And one of the things that she said in her research, she gathered that when children were, having a near-death experience and they saw somebody praying for somebody else's well-being, so like a thought-filled, hopeful wellness prayer, not like I want a new job or I need a new date, but like a real, genuine, heartfelt prayer about health or love or wellness, that they could see that thought and intention going from one person's heart to the recipient in the form of a rainbow.
Wow.
Like, that's so powerful to me.
Yeah.
So I try to tell that whenever I do a speech or when I do public speaking or whenever I do an event, that, for more than one child who's had a near-death experience to relay that story to me is pretty powerful stuff. I try to send more rainbows.
Have you heard of the International Association of
Near-Death Studies? Of course, yes, I've spoken there.
Well, in Evanston Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody watching might want to look that up, but it's a group
the second Saturday of every month at the Frank Auditorium.
And I've spoken there as well.
As have I.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
And that's why Mary Neal was coming to town, because she was going to be a speaker at IONS, at the Chicago IONS branch, and so they brought her downtown to the Chicago Tribune so I could interview her.
Okay. Now, you have written 4 books. Do you want to say some words about each of your books and why you wrote them or the purpose, etc.?
Yeah, the first one is called Stay Tuned, and that was after my father had passed away, and I started doing research into these people that claim to have metaphysical gifts, intuitives, psychics, mediums, whatever you want to call it. And I thought I was going to be this journalist that was just going to out the whole thing as a bunch of malarkey, if you will, as Joe Biden would say. But I wound up finding a lot of things that left me scratching my head, so all that research is in there, so that's Stay Tuned. Then when I came out with Stay Tuned as a journalist, right, talking about this metaphysical world, a lot of people started sharing their stories with me about their children and how they could see spirits or the other side or people who've passed away. I got tons of emails and lots of people reaching out to me, letters. So that's a lot of what I'm Spiritual Damn It is my second book.
Yeah.
Then the third book is...
And why did you pick that title? Was it because, people were making fun of you? And...
I think that you can say damn it and that God still loves you, and you can get a happy hour and God still loves you.
It's kind of like an oxymoron?
Yeah, it's like you can say damn it and you're still going to be okay, and you can hang upside down from a stripper pole and God still loves you. I mean, I was having a real issue with the spiritual people that were really awful human beings Monday through Saturday, but then they would go to church on Sunday and apologize, so that made it all okay. So I wanted to play homage to that, just kind of make for that. So I'm Spiritual Damn It was the second. And then the third is called This Isn't the Life I Ordered, which is where I do a lot of research. That's where Dr. Mary Neal is, people who've had near-death experiences. Anita Morjani is another one. I don't know if you've heard of her, but Dying to Be Me is her book. I interviewed her for that. Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, a lot of people, wonderful spiritual thinkers. And then the fourth book is called Psychics, Healers, and Mediums, a journalist, a road trip, and voices from the other side. And I just hit the road and went out and interviewed a lot of these best-selling people, some very well-known, some not so, and chronicled all that research in that book. So,
okay.
yeah.
And is there a common theme with each of your books?
I think the common theme is that we don't know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to learn more is to keep asking questions. And the moment we think we know it all is the moment we're going to get sideswiped with more information that makes us rattle our cage. And so if we think that we can just chalk it all up to, oh, you know, we thought the world was flat, right? We thought that it was okay to smoke in airplanes. Remember that? Eastern Airlines, you'd be sitting there in this like Petri dish flying with air smoke everywhere. I mean,
sure.
I just, and somebody said it was okay. So I challenge people to push the envelope and ask questions because we don't know until we keep asking.
Now you're working on another book. Do you want to talk about that? And where are you in the writing process?
Well, in the writing process, I'd say I have about 3 or 4 chapters under, you know, my belt already. And really it's about how trauma and the brain and PTSD, I've been interviewing a lot of brain specialists, neurologists, scientists, and how we can, the brain's so malleable, right? And so people say the heart is more important than the brain, but I think they're very connected, because if we have trauma from whether it's being in a war zone or having divorced parents or having severe loss, right? Somebody dies suddenly in the family, there is a pathway that the brain is triggered by and that we keep going down that familiar pathway, but it can be rewired. And so I want to empower people to heal their own brain, because what's happening is people are going for the wellness, but then they keep going back to not being well, right? And so I feel like our minds have a big part of that, and we need to be better about it. And this mainly happened from learning about the Monroe Institute. I don't know if you're familiar with the Monroe Institute, but they did a lot of research on soldiers who had PTSD and how to heal it. And there's a kind of meditation called Hemi-Sync, which is HEMI-SYNC. And it's just audio. There's no guiding, you know, picture a field, do this. Nobody's talking at you. It's sound, it's tempo, it's percussion. And the technology is that it literally gets both sides of the brains to, you know, to talk again and heals the neurons. So I found that it really helped me, and I want to empower other people to heal their brains so they can heal their life.
Well, this afternoon, Iraqi and Afghanistan war vet came over, and it's hard to talk about, but yeah, I've seen what he's gone through for 5 years.
Yeah, it's horrible, and you see the pain relived, right? You know, you talk about how powerful the mind is, and it can take you to bliss, and it can take you to hell, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to choose bliss, and it's hard programming. You know, that's why rehab is 40 days sometimes, right? You have to get it ingrained in the memory and make it a habit. And 22, it starts to be familiar, 22 times in a row, the research shows. But if you really do it 40 times, and then, oh my gosh, you get to 60, and then, boy, you get to 365 times in a row of doing something, it is ingrained, it is memory, it's new neural pathways. But it takes work. You know, we can't just sit on the couch and hope everything's going to be okay. I mean, I do believe miracles happen, and we can call in some positive miracles, but it does take, there's action and reaction. You have to invest.
Well, you know, there's different regions of the brain, you know, like one region associated with anxiety and PTSD,
Correct.
Another region associated with depression. But a lot of times, problems with the executive function of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, you know, where it's perseverance, follow through, impulse control problems, interferes with recovery.
It does. And then there's, if you really want to get into it, the pharmaceuticals, right? People are just popping pills because they want to leave themselves instead of love themselves. And that's an easier fix than facing the pain and the fear and the anxiety, and I get that. I'm not saying that everybody should just put their meds away, but it's too much of a go-to, and it's numbing the pain instead of helping to heal and rework the pathways. You know, I interviewed a mentalist recently, Sydney Friedman. I don't know if you've heard of Sydney.
I used to live a half a block away from
Sydney.
Sydney.
So Sydney, we did an event. I do these live events at the Wilmette Theater once a month called Conversations with Weigel, and Sydney was a guest, and he came and joined us on the radio that same week. But he taught me that, you know, we've got an antenna going, and as you know, our brain is very powerful with the thoughts.
Sydney is very gifted.
And he's incredibly gifted, right? And he explained that when he looks at you and says, okay, think of a number, he's thinking 90, boom. So that you think 90, because you're sitting there making eye contact, and then all of a sudden you say 90, and he shows you on a Post-it how he wrote the number 90. This is powerful. Our brains are always emitting transmitters, and we're always sending a signal, just like a giant satellite. And we have to take some responsibility for that, and it's powerful.
Well, you know, you get it, maybe I get it, but there's a lot of people who don't get it. You know, how do you get people who aren't interested in making change or who lack motivation or perseverance? How do you get those people going?
Well, if they're happy where they are, I leave them be. You know, if they really are. But if they're in victim mentality and all they do is complain, then by gosh, I'm gonna put something in front of them and say, try this meditation. Because the other thing is it doesn't have to be going off to a camp for 3 weeks and you know, a silent retreat. You could do 1 7-minute meditation and it changes your brain. You know, 3 minutes changes your brain. So,
agreed.
I'm really into results. You know, to me, talking is great, but the results are the proof, right? The proof in the pudding. And so if somebody says they really want to change, they have to want to. You know, we can't just bang the door and hope for the best, right? Inspiration comes from, or change comes from inspiration, not imposition. And I say that a lot, because when somebody's banging on your door, do you want to find Jesus? You're like, ah! You know, nobody wants to be forced to do something. We know this. I'm a parent, okay? I have a teenager. We can't force them to do things. We have to try to inspire them to want to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, you're watching Inner Quest. Our guest today is Jennifer Weigel, and our sponsor is Infinity Foundation. So stay tuned to the credits at the end to get more information about Jennifer or the Infinity Foundation. All right, let's see. Why do you think people have a problem embracing the metaphysical?
Because it's not as familiar, right? I mean, I think that East meets West. It's so much more common in the East to talk about acupuncture and energy work, right? And feng shui and all of these things that now we're getting over here in the West. It's just, I think, a lack of education. It's a lack of knowledge. We come into, like when I was a kid, I was told I had to be Lutheran, and then my dad got married to someone else and I had to be Episcopalian, and then he got married to someone else and I had to be Congregational. But it was basically, I was told which way to go on my religious path. There were no options. I didn't get a syllabus. I wasn't told about Muslims, and I wasn't told. There were a lot of Jewish people in my community. But, you know, I don't think we are given enough education.
Well, when we have a metaphysical experience or God experience, we don't have a Christian God or a Jewish God or a Muslim God.
Right.
It's a God experience.
Exactly.
And also it's non-sexist. It's not a male experience or female experience. It's just God.
Exactly.
Or I have a friend, she doesn't, because she feels religions are sexist, so she doesn't even talk about God.
Right. But, you know, I feel like we have to have conversations. Like I just did a talk on Saturday at a wonderful wellness center called the Soder World Wellness Center, started by Eric Soderholm, who was a White Sox player. And he and his family have this wonderful open house every September right after the harvest moon. And somebody came up to me and asked, what is the best church to go to? Because I need to find a church. And I said, the best church to go to is the one that makes you feel good. And if you love going to a Catholic church because you like the Bible verses and you like the community and you like the songs, by all means, go for it. But don't do anything that makes you feel like you're not accepted, like you're not appreciated, like you're not heard, and like you're not in a community that makes you feel good about yourself. It's all about empowerment, education. But I think that if you experience a God-like thing, right, whether it's like you, a near-death experience, or where you've been touched by something greater. I have had moments where I know something bigger has happened, and I had nothing to do with it. And it was because I was in radical acceptance and let it come in, and it happened. I can't explain that feeling to people. It's something you have to experience. So I just hope for other people they can experience it too.
Well, my hope is that more businesses will open up and let people, you know, have a room, a space, you know, where people can go and get quiet. I've worked with doctors and nurses and say, well, I'm just so busy and there's no, I said, every hospital has a, you know, a church or some place you can
Every
go.
airport you can go and pray somewhere. You know, there's somewhere that you can do that.
I didn't know there's a place in an airport.
Yeah. Check it out. There's absolutely, I mean, the Catholics have it dominated. But, you know, if you want to find your quiet space, you can find it at most airports across the country.
And you have a daily spiritual practice. You want to say a few words about that?
Well, I'm really big into the Hemi-Sync meditation. Now, I have made a practice that every morning, actually 7-minute meditation I do before I get up. My alarm goes off, and I do a 7-minute meditation.
Well, tell the audience you get off pretty early.
Yeah, 3:30 in the morning. It's really fun.
You're on the radio.
Yes, I do morning radio, so I get up at 3:15 in the morning. And so when I get up, it's like the middle of the night, and my body is very jarred, and it seems like my rhythm is off. So I do this Hemi-Sync meditation for anxiety. There's literally an app on your phone, and you can do for anxiety, for memory recall, for stress, for sleeplessness. It's wonderful.
So you're just listening to the sounds, and your brain and your mind become entrained with the sounds.
Exactly. And then I walk the dog. I believe in animal therapy, absolutely, and she's a rescue from Hurricane Harvey, and she's just pure heart. So I believe in starting off the first thing you see, the first person you see, or the first animal you see, exchanging a loving exchange, good morning, have a wonderful day, these kinds of things. And then I try to just kind of have an internal monologue of today's going to be great. You're going to have wonderful conversations. You're going to inspire as many people as you can. We can't change everybody, but we can try to be a shining light in a dark room if that's the way it is.
And what do you do if you have like distracting thoughts or images or memories that interrupt you? You have a way to get rid of those distractions?
Well, first I honor them. Because if we try to forget them like hot potato, they come back with a vengeance. Yeah. So I ask myself, what is it that I need to learn from this? A great guy named Paul Selig, have you heard of him?
No.
He's a channeler, and he's written, he's channeled like 5 books. And he came into this late, he was a Yale professor, he taught drama, and he got, these downloads later in life. But he says anything that annoys you is something you haven't healed inside. And so I just ask, what is it that I need to heal with this? And how can I heal this? What's the process? Show me how to heal this.
Okay. I do something a little different. I say, go away now. Most important thing is to be quiet and still. And if it's important, come back later. And usually it'll just go away and doesn't come back.
But it will come back if you haven't healed it. I find that happens like with anything in life, right? If you're trying to avoid something, that means the universe wants you to heal it. So if you avoid it, it'll come back in another costume at the next job.
Oh,
you know what
I'm not talking like
not
something.
A person.
No,
you're talking about a thought in your head.
Yeah, it could be. It's like, what's the order I'm going to run my errands today?
Oh, sure.
Nothing deep or.
Yeah.
So you do that once. That's the way you start your mornings.
Yep.
Do you do?
And I do an afternoon one as well.
Okay.
And then before bed, I really think that some of the traditions of saying your prayers before bed and blessing your food before you eat it, you can make this a non-religious but yet very spiritual experience. Because it's just gratitude. So, I'm grateful for my bed. I'm thankful for this pillow. I'm so excited that I get to go to sleep now and rest my body. And for tomorrow, waking up with that same, wow, look at this. I have breath in my lungs. If you have a breath in your lungs and you have a beat in your heart, you have all you need.
Yeah, think of the word respiration, respirit.
Perfect.
Yeah.
There you go, Jay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And have you introduced your teenager to higher consciousness?
He was knowing my thoughts before, he's in I'm Spiritual Damn It, my second book. He actually could see my dad, who died 6 years before he was born. So I didn't have a manual on how to deal with this, so that was part of my coming out and talking about how intuitive he was. He's an empath, which Dr. Judith Orloff talks a lot about, the empathic community, her book.
Psychiatrist.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've interviewed her.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, yes, she was honored at the Infinity Foundation.
Yes.
So Dr. Judith Orloff has helped me a lot with helping my son, who's very empathic. And you have to put up your force field, your energy field. You have to protect yourself from those energy vampires when you're an empath, because you absorb everybody's stuff. So my son's very tuned into this. Right now he thinks I'm in like a weird, moms, you're weird, but he was doing this when he was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think he'll circle back more into it, but he's very aware that when mom goes to meditate, he's got to stay quiet, and he does some of the Hemi-Sync meditation as well.
Have you ever actually tried to do it with him at the same time?
Yeah, it makes him squirm. He wants nothing to do with me right now.
Okay.
But when he was 8, that was a really fun activity.
Now, what's the difference between a medium and a psychic?
A medium will say that they're communicating with a spirit that's on the other side, whereas a psychic will say that they can predict what's coming for you. I am a big believer of free will. And so I'm not as much of a believer in psychics. I think that they might see, like Sidney Friedman, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. There are some things that might be meant to be that they could be getting a glimpse of. But depending on what you're thinking and repeating in your head, I think a lot of the psychics are thinking and repeating that exact same thing because they're catching your brain waves, if you will.
And have you had any medium or psychic experiences yourself?
I have. When I was a kid, I wrote about this in Stay Tuned. I used to kind of get anxious with people that I knew had ill intentions, right? I would get a stomachache. I'd have a physical reaction. And I could tell by the way I was feeling physically if my parents were going to have a good day that day. Or, you know, there was a lot of stuff going on. I would feel it in my body physically. And like a clairsentience, like a sensing, they call it. Like all the clairs, the claircognizant of a clair-knowing or clairsentience of clairsensing. So, yes, I did have some experience, but no, I've never seen a spirit or a dead. I have some clairaudient things that happen sometimes. I just took a very amazing sacred trip. I do these annual trips to sacred places, and I went to Greece, and I was at the Temple of Apollo, and I was walking down the sacred path, and I heard "thank you," and it was like, who the heck is that? So, you know, I think that when we're in a quiet, receptive place, anything is possible. I think we all could tune in if we chose to, but that's just not something I've experienced a lot of.
And do you think it could be cultivated?
I do.
Through a daily practice.
Well, here's what I think. You know how some people run marathons? That just
Yeah.
gives me the heebie-jeebies. I can't imagine running more than 5 miles ever. But some people can. But could I run a marathon if I wanted to train for it? Maybe, Jay, I could.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's in my makeup, but it's in
Yeah.
some people. So is everybody going to be talking to the dead? No, I don't think so. But some people are wired for it better than others, like basketball. I'm not good at basketball, but then there's Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
But even Michael Jordan doesn't make every basket, right? So
Right.
some people are just more, I'd say, in tune with the certain skill sets that it takes.
Well, I like what Wayne Dyer said. He said you'll get the lesson that you need to learn.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
yeah.
Lovely, lovely Wayne Dyer left us way too soon.
Met him too.
Yeah, met him as well.
Yeah, and when I met him, I just felt he was so unpretentious.
Yes. And
humble.
And humble. That's what he said. He says he wakes up every day and he says, show me how I can serve today. What can I do? Instead of asking what the world can do for me, what can I do for the world? And he taught me that. And that's another thing I try to remember every day when I'm driving into work at 4:45 in the morning when there's nobody on the road. Just what can I do today? How can I serve? And that action of gratitude and that action of service, I believe, comes back like a boomerang if you keep that in mind.
Yeah, and so, I mean, obviously you're a great communicator and you can share people's experiences to a larger audience. So how do you put your service out, you know, with your books, with your speeches, with your show?
Well, I do a lot of events for nothing. You know, I mean, I show up in people's living rooms to talk to their book club just for cheese and crackers.
Yeah.
I mean, I really believe in that because when you are with a bunch of people and then you have a connection. I mean, I think back to Jesus was a carpenter. He wasn't the CEO of Google.
Yeah.
You know, and he was telling his story on stump after stump after stump. He wasn't in a stadium like Joel Osteen. So I think that we have to remember that that's how grace and the word of the Lord or source or whatever you want to call it, I think that's how it spreads from person to person.
Well, I'm getting a sign we got 1 minute, so, and I've got a lot of more questions. Now they're telling me I got to wrap up.
Oh, geez.
Jennifer, it's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for having
For
me.
more information about InnerQuest Infinity Foundation, stay tuned to the credits at the end. Until next time, wish you good health, good fortune, and of course, good spirits.
Thank
you.
For more information about this show, our guest, Infinity Foundation, or any of our other programs, please visit our website, infinityfoundation.org, or call us at 847-831-8828.